Hello, everyone. What is The Disappearance of Richard Blackwood about? My book. Um, Now, there are a lot of topics that I thought about covering today, but when I thought of a lot of them, they were just like so depressing. I'm like, I'm already depressed, and the thing is that like if I'm a little depressed, I can talk about depressing topics, but if I'm in a real stupor, I can't. I mean, lately I've been kind of having a lot of highs and lows. Like I'll be in a high one day where I'm kind of very passionate. The next day, depressed, and so it's just I might go into reasons why in another video, but it's just not the time or the place here. But so I thought I would talk to you about my book, The Disappearance of Richard Blackwood. I just started chapter 13. I'm nearly to the end of this notebook. Actually, I'm going to have to probably start a new notebook, start the story in a new notebook very soon. And so I'm on chapter 13 now. But I know I talk about it a lot. I read a lot of excerpts from it, but I never actually talk about the plot. So I thought I would. Well, it's a book that takes place in the 17th century, the 1600s. Um, I'm not exactly sure. Sometime in like the mid to late 1600s. I'm not exactly sure what decade specifically yet. Um, and it takes place in New England, and I think probably somewhere in Massachusetts, or Maine possibly, but I'm not entirely sure where. Somewhere near the coast, yeah, either in Massachusetts or in Maine. It's not specifically Salem. In fact, it's probably not Salem. It's probably somewhere else, in the coast. But I don't name the town specifically. But and of course, one of the reasons is that I will be going to New England this autumn, where I hope to get a lot of interesting photographs for covers. I'm going to take some photographs of some Puritan houses, and I will also be going to the Melville Museum, although that has nothing to do with my book. But Herman Melville is a writer that has always inspired me, and I hope to spend some time taking the tour there, and so forth, and possibly see his writing desk. Um, but So I'm hoping to get a lot of inspiration there, and hopefully actually write some of the book there as well. But the story is essentially about the character of Eleanor Blackwood, and she's the main character, not Richard Blackwood, but and how she is someone who she is grieving the fact that has been traumatized by the fact that her husband Richard Blackwood has been away at sea. That he essentially left her while she was pregnant, to go to join and become the not the navy, but essentially to become a merchant at sea. And then, of course, she had the child, and the child died when it was very young. I'm not quite sure how young, but it was young. And a few years pass, and then Richard finally comes home, and when he hears about the fact that their child had died, um, but she just cannot bring herself to forgive Richard. She just cannot. She cannot do it. And she has this constant fear that he will leave her again. And regardless of how many times that he tells her that he won't leave her again, she just can't bring herself to believe it. Because the thing is, in this book, is that everyone there's a sense of unrequited love, or at the very least, people not getting what they want all the way around. And that's something that I understand unrequited love quite well, which is why one of the reasons why it's such a major theme. And so you have Richard, who wants his wife to forgive him, but she will not. And then she wants to be certain of the future, not realizing that you can never be entirely certain of the future. And so, if with her, it's less about what anyone else is doing. If with her, it's more of a psychological blockage, and how when you refuse to let go, and when you do not forgive someone, that can lead to your own destruction. And so, the central theme in the book is forgiveness, and the importance and necessity of forgiving. But then you also have other characters like the villain, one of the villains, the Reverend Heartstone. I mean, not Reverend Heartstone. Reverend Heartstone is in another book. That's from the Ecstasy and the Ignominy, and he's from the Ecstasy and the Ignominy. No, I meant Reverend Fletcher. There's a Reverend character in the Ecstasy and the Ignominy, and there's also a Reverend character in The Disappearance of Richard Blackwood, but they are entirely different characters. The Reverend Heartstone was an idealist, was a fanatic and idealist, whereas Fletcher is somewhat of a nihilist, and he may not even truly believe in his own religion. He's just using it for his own selfish desires. And but Fletcher is obsessed and wants Eleanor, and he thought that he could have her until Richard came back at the last moment. So he wants Eleanor, and he can't have her. And then, of course, you have, and I love playing with that and his psychological motivations from his point of view. And then so you have that, and then you have the prostitute Rose, who she's only been in one scene so far, but I hope to expand upon her. Who and now her character might ultimately go in a different direction because again she's still somewhat of a fresh character that I'm working with. But what I have planned for her at the moment is that she's in love with Richard because they were somewhat childhood sweethearts, and how she finds comfort and sees purity in him. But because he's married, he obviously isn't going to focus on her. And then so you have that, but then you have Jedediah, who cares about Rose, but Rose doesn't really seem to see it. And then you have Judge Blackwood, who is frustrated by the fact that his son is so loyal to his wife and not to him. So you have all these people who just cannot get what they want, and all of them have motivations to get rid of Richard. So when Richard disappears, then you're wondering, which he will disappear because it's in the title, you're wondering, well, who could have been responsible? Who did it? And that's the great mystery of it. And so that's ultimately what the disappearance of Richard Blackwood is about. And I haven't gotten to the part where he disappears yet. In fact, I've been rather slow with this book. This has been a very, very slow book. Mainly because when I wrote the ecstasy and the ignominy, I felt a surge and a rush of energy of trying to get the book completed now because so I could write my big epic. But since I already did that, I'm not really so focused on trying to be epic this time. So it's a much slower process. It's not that I'm not as passionate, but because I don't feel that sense of urgency, it's a lot slower. And so truthfully, the book may not even come out next year. I mean, at the rate that I'm going, because I'm very slow at the moment. And of course, I've also been somewhat depressed and disillusioned, and that slowed me down some. And so it will come out, but it's that this. I have been trying to release a book on like a 1 to 2 year period, but I may break that streak this time because it's just I'm not approaching my books in the same way as I was before. It's a far more slower and meticulous kind of approach. And and there's going to be a deep sense though of tragedy and melancholy about everything. And ultimately, because and one of the things I really love is experimenting with the language, because at this time in the in history you had characters who were still saying thee and thou, but in the mid to late 1600s it was those words were becoming somewhat obsolete. However, they would still use them occasionally in like highly emotional instances, so I try to save them for that if I'm trying to emphasize a point. Quite often I don't use it, but if I'm trying to emphasize a point, sometimes I'll use thee and thou because I do believe it can be appropriate in that case. And so and but because the characters are living in New England when which hadn't really been very industrialized yet, that there's a deep sense of there's a deep connection to nature. They have a deep connection to nature, which makes the language sound just so much more rich and poetic, I feel. And so the book is quite interesting for all of those reasons. It has also somewhat of a gothic tone to it as well. It has elements of the Scarlet Letter, but also the mystery of Edwin Drood, which is why I titled it um, the the disappearance of Richard Blackwood. Hopefully, though, I will finish this book and not leave you hanging. Hopefully, so that's just those are just some of the things that are going to be in my book. And so I hope you enjoyed my explanation of it because I know that some of you have been wanting to know what it's been about for a while. So hopefully I answered some of your questions.